My husband passed away 8 months ago, or so I thought. I remember the morning they told me. It was a Tuesday, just after 6, and the phone rang the way phones ring when something is wrong, not loud, not urgent, just steady, like it already knew I wouldn't want to answer. A state trooper's voice. An accident on Route 9, outside of Millbrook. My husband's car. The guardrail. The drop into the ravine. They said he didn't suffer. People always say that. I don't know how they know. His name was Gerald. We had been married for 41 years. I want you to understand what 41 years means. It means you stop thinking of yourself as a single person. It means you reach for someone in the dark without thinking, because your hand already knows where to go. It means that when they are gone, you don't just grieve a person. You grieve the version of yourself that only existed because they were there. I grieved all of that. For 8 months, I grieved. I sold his truck because I couldn't look at it in the driveway. I gave his coats to the church. I kept one of his flannel shirts folded in the nightstand drawer, the blue one with the worn collar, because some things you are not ready to let go of, and nobody has the right to tell you when. Our daughter, Nicole, came to stay with me for the first 2 weeks. She cooked and she cleaned, and she sat with me on the back porch in the evenings, and I thought, at least I have her. At least there is still this. I did not know then what she had done. I did not know what either of them had done. It was a Wednesday morning in March when everything fell apart. I had driven into town to pick up a prescription, nothing dramatic, just my blood pressure medication, the same one I've taken for 6 years. The pharmacy is inside the big grocery store on Clement Avenue, the one with the wide aisles and the good bakery near the entrance. I had been going there for 20 years. Gerald and I used to go together on Saturday mornings. He would always drift toward the deli counter while I checked the produce, and I would always have to go find him because he'd gotten distracted talking to whoever was behind the glass. I was thinking about that, actually. I was thinking about the deli counter and the way he'd lean on it with both elbows and smile, like he had all the time in the world. I was thinking about it with that particular kind of grief that feels almost like warmth, the kind that hurts less than it used to when I turned into the cereal aisle and stopped walking. There was a man at the far end of the aisle. He had his back to me. He was reaching for something on the upper shelf. He was wearing a gray jacket, the kind with the corduroy collar, and he had the same wide shoulders, the same slight forward lean, the same way of standing with his weight on his left foot. My prescription dropped out of my hand. I did not move. I did not breathe. I told myself, you are not well, you are tired, and you are still grieving, and your mind is doing what grieving minds do. It is not him. It cannot be him. You stood at his grave. You put your hand on the casket. Then he turned around, and I saw his face. It was Gerald. It was my husband's face. Older, maybe, or just tired, and he had grown a short beard I had never seen before, but it was him, the line of his jaw, the way his eyes moved when he scanned a room, the small scar above his left eyebrow from the time he fell off a ladder in 1987. I stood there and I could not make a sound. He did not see me. He looked down at whatever was in his hand, placed it in the cart, and began walking toward the other end of the aisle. Away from me. Something happened in my chest that I cannot fully describe. It was not relief. It was not joy. It was something colder than both a terrible, clarifying stillness, the kind that comes right before a person understands something they will never be able to ununderstand. If my husband was alive, then who was buried in the cemetery on Birchwood Road? I followed him. I don't know what I expected to do. I didn't plan it. I just moved. Quietly, keeping distance, staying near the shelves. He went to the produce section. He put apples in a bag, the way he always did, checking each one. He went to the dairy case. He paused near the flowers and looked at a bunch of yellow tulips for a moment, then kept walking. He did not buy the tulips. Gerald always used to say flowers were a waste of money. I used to tease him about it. I followed him outside. He loaded his groceries into a blue pickup truck I had never seen. I was parked 3 rows over. I sat in my car with the engine off, and I watched him pull out of the lot, and then I followed him not because I had decided to, but because my hands were already on the wheel, and my foot was already on the gas, and some part of me understood that if I let him disappear again, I would spend the rest of my life wondering if I had imagined it. He drove for about 12 minutes, not far from town, but far enough. He turned onto a road I didn't know, a quiet one with older houses set back from the street, and pulled into the driveway of a tan house with dark shutters and a small porch with potted plants near the door. I parked down the road. I sat there for a long time. A woman came out of the house. She was younger than me, I'd say mid-40s, with dark hair pulled back, wearing a sweater and jeans. She came down the porch steps and went to help him with the bags. And there was something in the way she moved toward him, easy and familiar, without thinking, the way you move toward someone when you have been doing it for a long time, that told me everything I did not yet have words for. He kissed her on the cheek. Then the front door opened again, and a boy came running out. Maybe 9 or 10 years old. He ran straight to Gerald, and Gerald dropped the grocery bag on the hood of the truck, laughing, and picked the boy up the way you pick up a child you love without reservation. My husband had a child. My husband had a child who was not ours. I don't know how long I sat there. The light changed. At some point I realized my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the effort of holding still. Every part of me wanted to drive up that driveway. Every part of me wanted to knock on that door and stand in the frame of it and say, I know who you are. I know who he is. I was married to him for 41 years. But I didn't. Not yet. Because a question had settled into me that would not leave. The same question, circling. If Gerald was alive, if he had staged his own death, if there had been no accident, if the car in the ravine had been staged somehow, then who had I buried? What was in the casket that I put my hand on and said goodbye to? I drove home. I sat at the kitchen table. I did not cry. I think I had moved past the place where crying was useful. I thought about who would have helped him. It was not a small thing what he had done. You cannot fake your own death alone. You need paperwork. You need someone at the scene. You need someone who can manage the calls, handle the details, redirect the grief. You need someone who knows the family well enough to make sure the widow doesn't ask too many questions. And then it came to me, slow and awful, the way things come to you when you already know the answer and you have just been delaying the moment of saying it out loud. Nicole, our daughter, she had been the one who handled everything after the accident. She had spoken to the troopers. She had coordinated with the funeral home. She had done the identification. She had told me, gently, that it would be better if I didn't. She had said, Mom, please, let me take care of it. You don't need to put yourself through that. I had been grateful to her. I had thought, what a good daughter. What a strong girl. I called her that evening. I kept my voice level. I told her I'd had a strange day and that I wanted to see her. Could she come by tomorrow? She said, of course, Mama. She said she'd bring dinner. I did not sleep that night. The next morning, before she arrived, I drove back to that road. I parked in the same spot. I wrote down the house number. I took a photograph on my phone, the mailbox, the truck, the house, because I am 63 years old and I have learned that the moments when you feel most certain are the moments you most need proof. Then I called a woman from my church, Renata, whose son-in-law is a private investigator. I did not tell her everything. I told her I needed help with something personal. She gave me his number. I called him on my way home. His name was Dale. He was professional and quiet, and he did not ask me why I was shaking when I spoke. He said he would look into it and get back to me within 48 hours. He called back in 36. Gerald was alive. His name now was Gary Hutchins, a name that turned out to be a legal alias he had set up through a filing in another county years before the accident. The woman was named Carla. They had been together for 11 years. The boy was 10. Gerald had bought the house in Carla's name in 2019, 18 months before the accident that killed him. He had been planning it for years. Dale told me one more thing. He said the alias, the property, the paperwork, none of it could have been filed without assistance from someone who knew Gerald's financial history well, someone with access to our joint accounts, someone who had power of attorney. He had added Nicole to our accounts 14 months before the accident. I sat with that for a moment. 14 months. While she was sitting across from me at Sunday dinners, while she was helping me plant the garden, while I was teaching her to make her grandmother's pie crust, while I was thinking, at least I have her. When she arrived that evening with dinner, I let her in. I let her set the food out on the table. I sat down across from her and I watched her pour 2 glasses of water. And I thought about 41 years and about flannel shirts in nightstand drawers and about 10-year-old boys who run toward their fathers. And then I said, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. She looked up at me. I said, I saw your father yesterday. The color left her face so completely and so fast that I knew with a certainty that required no further conversation that she had been carrying this for a very long time, that it had been heavy, that some part of her, perhaps, had been waiting for this moment. She didn't deny it. She said, Mama, please let me explain. I said, Where is he? She said she would take me to him. She said it in a way that suggested she thought a conversation between us might resolve something, might result in some arrangement, might lead somewhere other than where it was going. I understood then that she had underestimated me, the way that children sometimes underestimate their mothers, confusing patience for passivity, confusing grief for weakness. We drove to that tan house on that quiet road. I rang the doorbell. When Gerald opened the door, I watched his face move through several things in quick succession: recognition, shock, something that might have been guilt, and then, beneath all of it, something more complicated and more damaging than any of the others, a kind of relief, as if he had been waiting too. I did not say his name. I said, I'd like to come inside. We sat in his living room, my husband and I, after 8 months of my grieving him. The woman named Carla had taken the boy to a neighbor's house. I was grateful for that. Whatever the sins of the adults in this situation, the boy had not chosen any of it. Gerald told me the story. I won't give him the grace of calling it an explanation, because an explanation implies something that makes sense. He said he had been unhappy. He said he had felt trapped. He said he had not wanted to hurt me. He said there were things about our marriage he had never been able to talk about. I listened to all of it. I did not interrupt. When he was finished, I said, I'm not here for an apology. I'm here because I need you to understand what you've done legally, and because I want you to hear it from me directly before you hear it from someone else. I told him I had a private investigator's report. I told him I had documentation of the alias, the accounts, the property. I told him that what he had done, the staged death, the insurance claim, the fraud was a federal matter. I told him I had already been in contact with an attorney. I had called the attorney that morning. His name was James Whitfield, and he had been recommended to me by a woman at my bank who seemed to understand, without my saying so, that I needed someone very good. Gerald asked me what I was going to do. I said, I'm going to do what's right. Nicole was sitting beside him by then. She had been crying since we pulled into the driveway. She asked me if I could find it in my heart to keep this private. She said she was sorry. She said she had not known how bad it would get. She said she had made a terrible mistake. I looked at my daughter. I thought about everything I had given her, not as a transaction, not to keep score, but because you don't keep score with the people you love. You give because they are yours, and you are theirs, and that is how it works. I thought about how she had held my hand at the funeral. I said, "I love you, and I will love you after this. But what you did to me is not something I can protect you from. You made choices, and choices have consequences, and I will not lie down in the road so that you can walk over me." She cried harder. I left. I made the calls I needed to make. The attorney filed the paperwork. The insurance company, which had paid out a policy of $420,000 following Gerald's death, was notified. The matter was referred to federal investigators. Gerald was taken into custody 6 weeks later. He was charged with insurance fraud, identity fraud, and filing false documentation. Nicole was charged as an accessory. She did not go to prison. Her cooperation with investigators and the terms of her plea resulted in probation and restitution. But she lost her real estate license, which had been her livelihood, which had in part been paid for by the money she helped steal from me. The insurance settlement was reversed and reissued to me minus what had already been spent, which Gerald's other assets helped cover. The house on that quiet road, which had been titled in Carla's name, but purchased with funds traced to our joint accounts, became part of the civil recovery. I did not feel victorious. I want to be honest about that. Victory suggests something clean, and none of this was clean. I lost a husband I had already lost. I lost a version of my daughter I had believed in. I lost 41 years of a life I thought I understood. But I did not lose myself. That I kept. I still live in the same house. I still have my garden. I still go to the pharmacy on Clement Avenue, though I choose different aisles now just for the change. I have been back to church, slowly. Renata checks in on me every Thursday. I have started, cautiously, to talk to a counselor not because I am broken, but because I am wise enough now to know that some things are too large to carry alone. Nicole calls sometimes. I answer. We speak carefully. The way you speak when you are rebuilding something from the ground up, when you are not yet sure what shape it will take, when you are learning to love someone again at a different distance than before. It is not what it was. It may never be what it was, but I have not given up on it because she is my daughter, and I am her mother, and some things survive even this. Gerald, I have no use for. The flannel shirt is still in the nightstand drawer. I know that might seem strange, but it was there before he became the man who did this, and it will be gone when I decide I'm ready, and that decision belongs to me and no one else. What I want you to take from this, if you take anything, is not about betrayal. Betrayal is common. People fail each other every day. What I want you to understand is this. I am 63 years old. I buried my husband. I wept at his grave. I gave away his coats. I rebuilt my mornings without him. And when the truth came, I did not collapse. I did not bargain. I did not beg anyone to spare me from what was real. I walked toward it. That is not a small thing. And if you are in the middle of something that has broken your world open, I want you to know that walking toward it is possible, that you are more capable of it than you have been told, that the version of you that survives this will not be smaller than the one who went in. I promise you that. I found that out the hard way, but I found it out.